Hi. So, in today's journal, what I wanted to talk about was specifically about God within the context of religion. And if there is, without the context of religion, what or how I think about God. There's a part of me that always wonders if it is blasphemous to use um, the vocabulary where I would say the idea of God, because is God an idea or is God a belief? Uh, the one thing that I think would most often be fruitless is talking about God to a person of religion. And I've listened to conversations between people of religion and people who have a genuine need to understand what God is and how to approach or how to embrace God into their life. And it happens because when I say a person of religion, it's most often somebody who has such strong conviction in what they believe in. They barely even ask the question why the holy books, and they'd call it the for the lack of a better word, it's the holy grail. They think there's nothing beyond it, so there's no need to question it, as opposed to why is the holy grail a holy grail, as opposed to being garnering in oneself the courage and the inquisitiveness necessary to ask why the holy book, be it the Bible or the Quran or the Gita or the Ramayana or whichever it is. I'm not somebody who probably is authoritative on every religion or the religious books as a whole, but then I think about it as much as I possibly can, and that's where all this is coming from. And so I found it very difficult to find answer to, or to understand, or to form an idea, or to give God a form that I'm comfortable believing in and subscribing to and talking about, or if required preaching about, although I don't think preaching about God is what God would want. Again, that's my interpretation, one among books in the Holy Grails, what people interpret from it. So I take into account, this is what I'm trying to log today about how I understand God, or how I would want somebody who would rely on me to help them understand God, what I would tell them. That's what I'm trying to speak about today. One is obviously there's no need to understand it, and I think that's an often heard about idea, like you don't need to understand everything. And there's a part of it that I like, but that's not exactly the same as what they mean. Like, I have religious scholars and people who are so consumed by their religious beliefs tell me that do you really have to feel, or do you really have to see something to believe it? Do you really have to touch something to know it exists? No, maybe not. But then it's not that we want to cater to our senses before we decide whether to believe in God. It's more the need to understand that. And I'll come to that point. I'll come to why understand is a big question, and it's not in any way similar to the examples they would put across, like you don't really have to see something to believe it, you don't really have to touch something to they use the analogy of love, and love is a feeling that is beyond all the senses, since you don't have to see or smell or touch or taste to feel love. And so why do you want it with God? I get that, but the part about me that likes to subscribe to that theory is one where I think, what if God is beyond our capability of understanding? And this is solely my interpretation. I'd go on in detail about it later on in this log. But that's how I like to agree with somebody saying that there's no need to understand God. It's not that there's no need to understand God, but I will entertain a view that says I cannot understand God with the capacity of, with the physical and mental capacity, with the resources available. I cannot understand the superior force as God and claim it to be something or claim it to have a form, because I cannot even understand that form. I cannot describe that form with the words and with what abilities I have. So that being said, then comes the question, what is the need for God? And in my discussions with friends and people who consider themselves and are comfortable calling themselves an atheist or any different categorization as agnostic, theist. Point being, what is the need for God? And this is exactly what they say. Like if and there are people like that. There are people who are quick to say that they need God because God helps them understand right from wrong, and the fear of God helps them want to stay in the right. And there are people who are waiting to explode into evil and wicked and harmful for each other. An area like that, if it was not for God, there are people like that, I'm told that. And this is what somebody who is quick to answer the question of why God would say. And an atheist is not all atheists. The people I talked to who identify themselves as an atheist was quick to come to the question if the fear of God is what keeps you away from doing something very harmful for your fellow being, then there's something really wrong with who you are as a person, who we are as people. And true, I mean, there's no part of me that disagrees with that. But that's a very rational observation. But then I look at a person, and when you define a person, he's a construct of his DNAs and genes and his thoughts and his hormones, and it all leads to how he behaves. And there is one such person in front of us, and the world is made of many such people, and who, in terms of how all of that constructs them, like hormones and like thoughts and like belief systems and genes and DNAs, how all of it makes a person behave is as different as it is identical. And to educate such a person merely through communication or education, or to rely on him to use empathy and sympathy and love and compassion and acceptance and tolerance and all the traits we require to coexist, to expect that any person that you see in front of you in your life, to expect that person ought to have all of those, is too much to ask. It's not a practical way of doing it. So my question is, if there are some people who stays away from committing a crime or doing something really harmful for a fellow being because they fear God and the consequence, and they fear hell, or they fear the fury of God, and they fear judgment, what's wrong with that? I mean, what is the objective here? We want collective good. We want good for people. We want to be able to coexist. We want that's what you could say. You don't want anything in that life is completely insignificant, and we're just living to die and dying to let the nature live. And that's a whole different tangent. But within the premises of we want the good for each other, what's wrong with the fear of God? What's wrong with the existence of God? If it is helping people stop their primal instincts, prevent their impulses to hurt the person next to them, in front of them, if the idea of God is making them want to share what they have and to be kind to each other, that's good. Now I get why atheists are probably not against that, but they're against the other side of it. What if religion, which is instructing directly or indirectly or in forms of many corrupted and polluted interpretation, if religion is asking somebody to perform a crime for its own credibility, its own strength of community, then that's a whole different thing. That's not a God thing. I think religion is an effort to humanize, anthropomorphize, or I don't know the word for it, but anyway, religion is a way we found by which we could humanize God. Religion is a way God started to have a form, and most often the form is very human, and it's from how it's physically represented to how decisions are made. And that's largely the issue, if you ask me. Whichever religion it is, it's often talked about, it's either the Son of God or the Messenger of God or the Prophet or gods themselves, and still they're all humanized. I mean, one could argue that Hinduism often comes with this gods with many hands and many heads, but that is again a form of superhumanizing God as opposed to accepting the fact that we cannot understand God and the form God would take. And in all of these religions and religious texts, the messengers of gods in their human forms are as flawed as any human is. And that could be why we are as flawed as we are, if religion is of critical importance to our life. I wonder what it would be like for a child to be born and raised with no sense of religion. Would it be possible to explain to him and educate him about the idea of God in that case, and how would we do it? And if he did it, how will he understand that God? What his ways in which he approaches that God? Does he submit to that God? Does he just live and die knowing that the God exists? And assume that we didn't instill in that child the fear of God, but we instilled in him the right way to understand that there is a superior, supremely intelligent force, a being that cannot be understood, that's just out there, and just saying that just out there is very limited. It's just as far as we can say. We cannot even explain this existence, and this child should learn to be kind and compassionate and giving and unconditional in his ability to love and to wish good for others, despite what his emotions and impulses tell him. If he's trained that way, and then he has a concept of God, and there'll be an independent nature to him. He wouldn't be dependent on God to as in how we would go about, oh God, look at all the crime that is happening look at all the bad things that are happening to this world, look at all the injustice that is happening to the world. And I don't think the child would do that, and because his understanding of God is not a being that's sensitive to the injustice happening between people. God is in no way human. To protect people was never part of God's job. I mean, if he has to protect people, if he has to protect a person, then he has to protect a plant, and he has to protect animal, and he's protecting an insect, and he's protecting a microorganism. And just because a microorganism doesn't have the sentience and the mind to go like, oh, I clap my hands and I kill so many germs, microorganisms, and these microorganisms has a sentience, and they're praying to God, oh, look how unjust is he didn't have to clap the hands and he clapped the hands and we died, and how unfair is that? And I think that's not God's concern. Maybe we should give a higher meaning to the presence of God than just people. Why are we so insistent on putting such significance to our lives and what happens? Significance to life, as pessimistic as it might sound. The purpose of God, I might say, is to remind us of how equal, if not how, if you're putting how we feel about ourselves on one side, how we carry ourselves on one side, the mental preset that we embrace, to the need for attention and respect, and the need to feel important. I think the presence of God should serve the purpose of reminding us we are none of that. It is all a construct that just is between us as people. Because God is so superior that we are do not look at God as the creator of life, but look at God as the creator of the universes, all of it. And then in universes, how small are we? And so in the grand scheme of God of creating universe, and in His plan, which we don't even understand, how does a speck on a speck on a speck that we are become any important to God to use terms as unfair and unjust to describe His actions? We are just, again, we have to embrace the insignificance of us in order to be able to be any kind of good, in order to give everything we do any kind of attachable meaning. Right. Fear is often seen as a negative quality, but fear of God, I believe, is not a negative quality. It's not something to shy away from. It's not something that you have to hide from. Why is fear a negative quality at all? I mean, it is an embracing fear that we have done our best in what we call life. And so fear of something as superior as the God that I described, which again is just my interpretation, and these are just my thoughts, and it might not mean anything in the, but then, yeah, what's the whole point of anything? But then everything has a point within this life that we have chosen between the people that we are as humans. So a completely different tangent, but yes, so to feel insignificant as compared to the supreme, that is God, to feel insignificant, to feel fear of God that is so supreme, what is so wrong with that? I believe, again, this is a completely different subject which requires its own time to dive into, But I believe people are inescapably flawed, and we'll always be flawed, and there's no way we could become that good. We're all just doing what we can. We are all trying to do something, because doing nothing is so terrible, and doing everything is quite impossible. So we're doing what we can. We're just doing what we can. Having said that, fear of God is good in that case, because we will constantly strive to be a better version of ourselves, at least in the fear of God. And that's not everybody. I'm saying, if you don't need the fear of God to be a better person, that's ideal. That's perfect. If you don't need the fear of God to prevent yourself from being rude, or saying, or using a knife to stab somebody, or any impulses that makes you want to do something hurtful to your fellow being. Being hurtful is not the only bad thing, but then if that could somehow involve in its description what we do to each other through the course of life, if fear of God helps prevent that, good. If we don't need the fear of God to prevent that, very good. So with as many people as there are in this world, I think the existence of God is only doing good. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is the strange thing that I observed, the need for atheists to debunk the idea of God. And that makes you wonder, their conviction, an atheist conviction in the fact that God does not exist, is so strong they want to make everybody understand that there is no God. Why? I mean, if God... Okay, again, the answer they say is they don't want bad things to happen in the name of God. Of course I understand, but there are more good things happening in the name of God than there are bad things. There are more bad things happening in the name of religion than good things. Yeah, perfect. I know. But again, but God is not the culprit there. Religion is the culprit there. So an atheist going on and on about how a believer should walk back and examine their need of God is only doing only doing some kind of it's just a conversation, it's just entertainment, because I don't see a purpose beyond that. What exactly is an atheist? It's far too ambitious for an atheist to think that his ability to turn a believer into a non-believer and still have values that are better than the values that he had with God. That's just... what's the point of that? That's just like the human need to do something, to feel like somebody. That sounds more like this. Essentially, an atheist could be an atheist who is doing good, and religion is a weird subject. A believer in God could be a believer in God and do good, and they both can just go on about their life. There's no need for the debate. And in between comes the person with religion, and religion is a human construct, and I don't even know if it stands apart in this conversation, because we're talking about an atheist who understands that he doesn't need a God to be good and to do good, and a believer in God who understands that he can do good and be submissive to the God that he believes in. Okay, so what is God without religion? Let's form a God without a religion. Let's, at the risk of sounding like a cult leader, which I can't seem to help when the topic is this. So God without a religion is a God that cannot be understood. And it is the undying yearning to understand God that created religions and this imagination that created form to God, and that came into written scripts and the holy books. All those are reflective of people's ability to, or people in the inability of people to continue believing in something that they cannot understand. It's their inability to accept. Be inquisitive, be curious, ask questions, ask why. I get all that, and I'm saying that's what created. Sometimes there's no answers, and then you want to create answers, and you believe there are answers, and there's never actually one answer. There's never actually one way to say a thing. There's never actually one holy manuscript that can be interpreted as it is written. I mean, the moment something is thought about, it is influenced by my sentience and my emotion and by my hormones and by who I am, by my circumstance. And how can there be a answer to questions especially such as this? So in a strange way, I am, in a strange and brief and compact way, I just am being very dismissive about religion, as a religion is answers created. Religion is a lot of answers created to answer the questions that seem very hard to understand. So if there is no religious answers in a world where those religious texts and religious answers doesn't exist, what is the need of God there? I mean, there was a time when people worshipped the sun and the moon and the stars, and there's some version of it that makes a lot of sense. Imagine this. You can't control the sun, you can't control the moon, you can't control the rain, the lightning, the storm. It seems like superior forces, and I'm not saying pray to them and they should be the gods. I'm saying that makes far more sense than a religious text that says God has a form and God asked us to make the other person believe in what I believe or not believe in what somebody else told them to believe. It's far better. What harm does it do if we all wake up in the morning and thank the sun? I mean, it's not like the sun is there. Oh, he thanked me. Very good. Maybe I shouldn't be too hot today. No, the sun isn't doing that, and obviously the sun is not listening to the prayers. That's not the whole point. But then, as flawed beings, that's a flaw that you can better accept than a flaw where you wake up and you're like, today I will slap the people who think my religion is not right. Wait, what? Yeah, so see, that's what I'm trying to say. Religion is also the fact that we need community, that we need a group identity, that we don't need to feel alone. We are somehow attracted to the idea of community, of group too. As people, as humans, we are this being that we need each other, but we also want to be separate from each other. We need to be different, but then we want to feel alike with people. Such a strange species we are. In our own understanding, I am of the species, and I say strange. As pessimistic as I sound, I look at all this in awe. So there's no version of me that's saying that we are doomed, and maybe we are doomed, but that's not me saying we should self-destruct. Now the question of the absence of religion. The absence of religion is perfect. But then the truth is, such a situation will never arise. There's always going to be a religion born out of the need for people to come up with answers they cannot find answers for. They cannot find answers for the questions they cannot answer. That's going to demand a religion. The need for group and the need for community is going to ask for religion. The need for authority, the need to control people is going to ask for religion. So, I don't know how intelligent and educated we as people should be to get to a point where we do not care about a need for religion, or to be able to accept questions that cannot be answered and not have answers manufactured. And I'm not saying the manufactured answers are wrong or right. They could be as close to a right answer as any. It's just that it's influenced by people and the sentience, our idea of God. So what about the absence of God? Let's say absence of religion in the human front. What about the absence of God? Again, I don't think an absence of God can be imagined. It can be imagined. And I imagine it to be what's going on with animals. But you see, every animal fears something. And I think every life fears something they cannot control, that is capable of consuming them. So as long as there is a superior force, there's a superior being, there's a superior existence. And for man, if it is nature and the unpredictability of nature, the fact that there's going to be a giant solar flare right now and everything is done. There's just going to be an asteroid crashing into the earth and we're done. There's that fear, and so there's a superior being then us. And I'm not saying those are gods, do not get me wrong, but I'm saying the absence of God. This is for me to explain the point that I'm trying to make, which is the absence of God seems, it can be achievable. It could be possible. It is a reality that can exist. But then if you break it down, God is just a being we fear. I mean, is God a being we love? And we love God because of fear. We pray to God because of fear. We submit to God because of fear, because of the fact that God is superior. So how can there be no God? Then the other side of things. So, like I earlier said, humanizing God. So, I think there was a time when I said, if God was watching everything, God is sensitive to everything that we do, it's very similar. God probably is not looking at us and feeling sorry or feeling emotional or feeling sad or hurt or... And look at the religious texts. Islam has, again, this is very much a wide interpretation of a large text to accommodate my belief system and my interpretation. So I could be wrong, I am wrong, or I'm as wrong as I'm right, because it's human interpretations, and interpretations are interpretations. Understanding is understanding, and it's limited to my capacity of intellect. So Christianity, where there's a gravity to the fact that we should understand that God is forgiving, and we should be as forgiving as God towards each other to lead a better life. And how in the Revelation God is going to take the form of a judge. And then in Islam, the Prophet resorting to violence to fix the issues that are arising because we are people, basically. In Hinduism, the reincarnation of Kalki, the destroyer of filth, coming to destroy everything because it's not working out. People are not working out. And then Gautam Buddha, who chose to just give up, and there's no point to any of this. This is all very much my own influenced interpretation, and it's not what the book says, or it's not what you believe in. I respect that, and this is just a journal, so forgive me. But I believe I see that similarity, I see that pattern, that God has that, whichever form it took, and the people who gave it that form was intelligent enough to understand that we as people are not fixable as people. We just have to get to a point where get to become something that we are not. So essentially, God, if it's not a human God, as I believe, is not sitting out there to justify or call our actions unjust, or to sympathize or feel. Maybe there was a time when I used to think maybe God looks at me the way I look at my pet, with affection and compassion and love. but then I'm not really looking at what my dog does, and that is unjust to the other dog. You cannot. Maybe I do that with my pets. Maybe we all do that with pets. But the way things are, to answer the question of why is God so unjust, that's just weird. Unjust is a people thing. Maybe we are just about to kill each other and destroy each other anyway. So how can, as people, we coexist and become better beings with the existence of God? It's by educating people to form their own idea of God and prayers, and it's about educating people about treating each other the same way as they would treat themselves. But that is with the understanding that I am as insignificant as you are, and my hurt and my pain need not be more heavier than somebody else's, even though tangibly it might be. And then it's not with our emotions, with our sentience, with our physical body and what's happening inside the body. The mind is a result of the body. And with all that in mind, it might be sheer impossible to have a version of God that's good for everybody. A God that doesn't need to become a topic of discussion. A God that doesn't need religion. And you could ask the version of what I said about God, how is it different from any religion? I'm trying my best to question it and answer it myself. I'm trying to find answers myself. So I'm trying to convince myself and look at I'm not carrying the same conviction as a religious scholar about what I said, but you know what I mean. I am equally convinced about what I believe. Alright. So, yeah, that's just some of the thoughts I wanted to share.